Hi everyone and welcome to your horoscope for the week of November the 2nd, 2020. This horoscope is brought to you by 1millionnights.com. We have a really active and karmic sky playing out all throughout the week, but this is where we get to the part where it's not just, the karmic winds, the karmic tides washing us where they want. We get to the part where we also have to make a decision or at least adapt a viewpoint, a position, a stand of what we want to do, how we want to do it, and ultimately what the future means for all of us, both individually and naturally, collectively. The problem is the energies are not crystal clear. There is a lot of mystery in the sky. It's almost like an extended Halloween period playing out all of next week, but unfortunately, the mystery doesn't really have a magical connotation, but rather a certain type of confusion, but this is the confusion which forces us to reach a state of clarity, like it or not, prepared or not. So one of the most relevant power players here is going to be, without a shadow of a doubt, Mercury. Mercury, who is still retrograde, who has freshly retrograded back into the sign of Libra, and it reforms the squares with the Capricorn planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. So the symbolism of these squares that Mercury holds are going to be the relevant energies at the beginning of the week until we get to the culmination point around the 4th of the month, when Mercury stands still in the sky and prepares to go direct the next day. Now, Mercury in the sign of Libra is all about our relationships, how we communicate with other people in our lives. Libra has to do with our partnerships, our alliances, one-on-one contracts, our closest friends, our business partners, perhaps our colleagues at work. Libra represents the 7th astrological house. So, one way or another, those people who are, permanent parts of our lives are a reflection of us. And they are they meant to basically complete our lives. They hold the energy of what we lack or what we have very little of. Or they can also represent a karmic challenge that we have to overcome, and they are the gateways of that karmic entanglement which leads to evolution or deep self-knowledge. So these squares with Mercury retrograde that the Capricorn planets hold are basically a celestial invitation to reanalyze, rethink all of our relationships, especially our closest relationships and our contractual relationships. The keywords here are going to be equality, fairness, mutuality, reciprocal relations. If whatever we have to offer is somehow mirrored back at us, or whatever those people in our lives offer to us, if we can actually give something back equally valuable. It doesn't really have to do with material value. It is basically the principle of value. If we are a great addition to the lives of those people one way or another, or vice versa. Now, Mercury square with Pluto, greatly expanded and magnified by Jupiter, is about power. How much power do we allow other people to have in our lives? And how much power do we personally have over the lives of other people? This can represent who makes the decision, who is the alpha, who is the dominant force, and who is the passive force, so to speak. And since the natural ruler of Libra, the planet of love and beauty, Venus, is also in this part of the sky, in her home sign, well, that represents that how we feel, matters of the heart, and the truth that lies within our heart spaces is going to matter very, very much. So this decision-making process reanalyzing our relationship. Whatever I have spoken about earlier is not going to be just done with cold rationality, strict logic, but also how we feel, and also, the morality of the heart. Is it fair? Is it correct? Is it moral? How this relationship plays out in our lives. And ultimately, after the 4th of November, when Mercury is going to go direct and ultimately re-enter the sign of Scorpio, that is when this profound transformation is going to take place. Some relationships naturally are going to be eliminated, others are going to be transformed, changed profoundly, while others are going to be reborn from their ashes just like a phoenix, which can mean a fresh start. But this isn't anything negative, even though there might be some strong feelings and angry words. Mercury, after all, is the planet which governs speech and communication. The best way to take this energy, where one door closes, another one has to open. So whenever a relationship ends or exits our life, another one is bound to take place. And it may not happen immediately. It can happen, for example, a professional type of relationship once Mercury advances into Capricorn. A spiritual type of relationship can happen straight away in the month of November when Mercury is in the sign of Scorpio. Also when after it moves into the sign of Sagittarius. And of course a friendship or a humanitarian community type of relationship can take place once Mercury enters into the sign of Aquarius. So if relationships end, do not worry and do not be saddened by this, even if they end legally, for example, a divorce, because something new is bound to take their place. So this is the big celestial setup. But of course, this isn't just about endings and terminations. It can be like, as I said earlier, a profound transformation where, for example, two people, regardless of their relationship, may it be just a romantic partnership which isn't official yet, or it can be a business type of collaboration. It can be so very many different things where they decide to take it to the next level, make a commitment, and make it a permanent and even legal part of their lives. So this is like a profound transformation where something uncertain and rather unstable, ephemeral, becomes something for the long-term future, and it possesses guarantees and stability. All of this is perfectly valid regarding, diplomatic relationship between nations, treaties on the world stage, between different countries or regions within a country. So this is where the diplomatic configuration is definitely going to be transformed, enter into a new phase where old treaties or agreements or legislation, legal systems, the sign of Libra has also much to do with those, are going to change and transform. And even though not immediately, we can experience the higher octave of everything that will suffer this imminent transformation. Now later on, towards the very last days of the week, Venus in Libra is going to hold an opposition with Mars from Aries. Now an opposition is a hard aspect, but it doesn't have to necessarily mean anything negative. It can also play out as, as surrendering the ways of the ego, surrendering my way or the highway, and allowing greater love to dominate our relationships. Whenever there is an opposition, the symbolism of these two signs and planets tries to balance each other out, so the energies find a middle path. So, a relationship which was heavily dominated by ego and survival instincts. For example, fear that you lose that person, attachments, everything that has to do with our reptilian brain, so to speak, can be surrendered in order to greater expression of freedom and these Venusian vibes, Venus in Libra, is all about the freedom and beauty of thought, equality, justice, etc. to take over. So that can be a very beautiful and useful transformation, saving the relationship. But at the same time, when we see that another person's ego just poisons the relationship, the connection, well, that is the moment when we can say, well, I had enough, and this relationship either changes or it terminates. So naturally it can also represent a termination, but it's for the greater good. Now, another way this energy can play out is compromises, where we surrender something, but we gain an advantage, we gain a position, or basically, sometimes it can mean when we give up on pride, when we give up on, for example, clinging on to the illusion that we are an independent person, we are happy, and we have everything in our lives that we need, and we don't need anyone else. Once we surrender that, well, chances are that a lot of people can just pop up in our lives who can help us, who can fill our lives with compassion, solidarity, who can become a great addition in our lives if we are able to surrender pride and the ways of the ego, or maybe personal illusions. But of course, this can play out in a totally different way, where for our dignity, for our independence, for, the integrity of our heart, we have to give up on advantages that we possess in our lives by, surrendering all of these. Mars, even retrograde in its home sign of Aries, is still a warrior. So, sometimes it can play out as having to fight for our morality, for our honor, for our dignity. And that means, losing out maybe advantages, maybe people who are present in our lives just because they represent, some kind of gain or some kind of advantage, but they don't represent any kind of emotional value. So chances are that a lot of these relationships based on heavy compromise or necessity or practicality are going to be terminated here, because Venus in the sign of Libra represents that our hearts at this time need to be even lighter than a feather, because we want to live with ourselves in harmony, in honesty, and in purity. Now, at the same time, the Sun in the sign of Scorpio is opposing Uranus, so it pulls everything to the surface. It can represent both collectively, globally, a massive earthquake, basically, of emotions, of informations, of secrets and truth which shock us, which maybe scare us, which unsettle us, coming to the surface. But it is perfectly valid individually, especially when those truths are unconscious thoughts or feelings or something that we have repressed or ignored for a lot of years. So this can be, for a lot of us, a moment of confrontation with the ultimate truth dominating our lives, and those uncomfortable truths that we just didn't want to look at until this present moment might just pop up in our minds, and they might just surface in our conscious, and we will have no choice but to deal with them. But ultimately, this is like a profound purification, which goes hand in hand with Venus in the sign of Libra. All of this is meant to make us feel pure, clean, and, free from the past, free from the mistakes, free from shame and guilt and all those very heavy emotions. And as I said in the first part of this horoscope, on one hand, yes, the karmic waves, the karmic tide is washing over all of us, but we already reached a point where we also have to co-create, or at least support this with a decision, with a standing point, with an attitude, with a stance that we take in order to direct the waves, the tide, where or which area of our lives has to be flooded over, because if we allow it to just flood over everything, we might drown in this. This is supported by a very powerful yet unusual aspect, a quincunx or inconjunction between Jupiter and the North Node in the sign of Gemini. This, without a shadow of a doubt, means that our life principles, our core beliefs, whatever we hold as the ultimate truth, at least for us personally, for example, based on life experience, Jupiter in Capricorn, is going to determine our path in the immediate future and wherever we are heading towards from a karmic perspective, because, the North Node is the symbolism of the forward advancement that all of us, both collectively and individually, set on karmically. In other words, where life is going to be taking us in the close future. Now, at this time, Jupiter is very, very close to Pluto. Their conjunction is going to perfect itself towards the middle of November. So this is a really, really strong energy, because whatever the year 2019 and 2020 has taught us individually until this present moment, that wisdom, that profound inner transformation, all of our losses, everything that we suffered, well, all of those are very powerful lessons that we need to incorporate and embody right now, because simply there is no old way of doing things anymore. There is no tradition or know-how or custom that we can rely upon, because 12th of January 2020, Pluto and Saturn conjunction deconstructed everything. So the old order is gone. Things don't work and function anymore as they used to from any perspective. Legally, socially, politically, materially, business-wise, everything that has to do with the sign of Capricorn. The old normality is gone and a new one doesn't exist yet, because we are constructing it each brick at a time. So when there is no past, when there is no future, because the future is so very uncertain, we are co-creating it, but it's also chaotic. We don't know what we are making just yet. So the truth and wisdom and the power lies only in the present moment, and this is basically the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. What it is that we can do in the present moment, either to change our circumstances, to resist, to hold on, to be hopeful, to be faithful, to stand from a place of integrity, dignity, and naturally, how it is that we respond to external events. Do we allow them to have a rather unhealthy power over us, like fear and terror, and a depression because of the uncertainty? That can be the most negative expression of Pluto. Or do we detach ourselves and just believe in our own versions, whatever has to manifest for us personally, that we're able to cope, we're able to survive with dignity, of course. We are able to have a future even though things are very uncertain in the moment, and whatever is going on outside in the world is simply not us. It is not our karma, it is not our life, it is basically something that we are observing. It doesn't really mean that we are involved or entangled into it. Just because we have, for any reason, chosen this timeline to incarnate here and live out our destiny, our life stories, doesn't necessarily have to do that much with whatever is going on in the world right now. And no crisis lasts forever, so there is gonna be an end to this as well. And if we look back, all of our ancestors, for example, our great-grandparents, even our grandparents, everyone faced moments when the world changed profoundly and they had no choice but to adapt. But that didn't mean that their life ended, their life stopped. Of course there were a lot of victims, because some people did come here some people did incarnate here to be part of all of this, an active part, where it is simply part of their lives and destinies. But others, it has nothing really to do with them actively. Maybe some people are here to reconstruct, other people are here for their own personal soul motives, reasons. For example, if you need to find a specific soulmate who is in this timeline, well then, regardless if there is a global crisis or conflict or whatever, you still come here because that connection has to take place. So what I'm trying to say here is, yes, all of us are caught up in this, but detachment is possible. For a lot of us, it's simply not part of our karmic journeys to, have our saying, have our ways in however this global crisis turns out and plays out. Some are just here to observe in a very detached way. And those who are here to have a great saying in this, who are active parts of this, well, they are guided anyway, they are heavily entangled, so they don't even know of anything else. They can't even perceive a detached state because it is part of who they are and why they came here. So it's very, very easy to tell if you are actually part of this or not. If you are part of this, well, you don't know anything else. This is what you are thinking of. This is what you're processing. This is what you're planning. This is what is going on inside of you 24/7. So detachment or anything else won't even be an option. It is easy as that. Basically, it is your perceptions and the frequency of your consciousness that tells you if you are an active key player or if you're just an observer. And if you need to be convinced to go out and be part of all of this one way or another, then chances are you're not really a player in that unless you choose it, unless you expressively want to. So on the 4th of November, we are going to have a very strong karmic moment. On one hand, Mercury stands still in the sky and prepares to go direct the next day, meaning that it's going to be extremely strong. Now, on that day, we can expect heavy disruptions of communication, electronics failing us, software problems, even angry words, even confusion, conflict. And in Americas, it's very close to election day, so there can be, unexpected turnaround of events, or total confusion, total lack of clarity, controversy, speculations. In the worst case scenario, having to redo everything. And there is a quincunx, an inconjunction, between Venus in her home sign of Libra and Uranus in Venus's other home sign of Taurus. So what a very powerful synchronicity and synergy here. Venus in Libra is diplomacy. It is the relationship between our leaders, representatives, and the people. And of course, Taurus is our value systems. So whatever the election produces, the result, well, people might not like it. People might feel a totally different way. People might feel, for example, deceived, or it's not their truth based on, the heart, Venus. And Uranus is the planet of rebellion, revolution, uprising. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. Everyone can interpret this for themselves. Another inconjunction happening simultaneously is between Mars, retrograde in his home sign of Aries, and the Sun in Scorpio, Mars's other sign. So this is a very strong, fiery energy. Sun in Scorpio, people will demand the truth. People will demand the exposure of secrets. So it can be like a mediatic or social conflict warfare for the truth, for the secrets to be revealed. Battle between individuals and the players behind the curtains, behind the scenes in the secrecy. But since it's an inconjunction, well, It doesn't necessarily have to mean that the truth is authentic. It can be conspiracy. It can be absolutely anything, but just to start this conflict, this clash, so to speak. But of course, this can play out in a totally different manner, where, Mars in Aries, the individual's will, well, they can say, I had enough, I don't want to be part of any of this, and they just surrender and detach, and that's about it. And yet another quincunx happening at the same time. The moon quincunxes the Capricorn planets. So feelings are gonna be really, really strong, and the desire for change, for stability, for solutions, for, a final verdict is going to be really, really strong. But of course, towards the very end of the week, there is a saving grace in the sky, where Neptune, from his home sign of Pisces, forms a trine with the Sun in Scorpio. So this is a very beautiful and strong water trine. It is not going to be perfect next week yet, but it's still very relevant. What this means is the power of faith, the power of spirituality, the power of metaphysics, for example, even the power of arts and music. So it doesn't really matter how grim or doomy the situation seems, whenever there's inspiration, whenever there is a source of beauty, a source of faith, a source telling us directly that the Spirit is right here with us and inside of us, well, that is already enough to empower people to resist, to be compassionate, to be loving, to be gentle, to bring out their very, very best selves, regardless of how tough or unkind the external circumstances may seem. And another expression of this energy, your dreams, your biggest and most profound dreams, can become reality if you believe strong enough, because the Sun in Scorpio can represent all the unconscious patterns which basically, from a quantic perspective, create our reality. It is what we project onto the physical world, and that determines what we live. Sometimes when the night seems to be the coldest, darkest and deepest, is exactly before the sunrise, before the breaking of the dawn. So this is quite a miraculous energy, especially due to the Scorpio Sun, which can also mean rebirth, resurrection, regeneration, upgrade, transformation complete. So for some people, this can be their new beginning. Whenever the old patterns died inside of them, especially at the beginning of the week, this is going to be a major karmic theme with all the Mercury squares. Well, afterwards, after they're buried, so to speak, something new can arise from the ashes, a new outlook, a new faith, a new inner power, which changes reality in an instant. The sign of Scorpio is one of the most mysterious signs out there, and Pisces is one of the most spiritual signs. So this is definitely the cocktail of miraculous karmic completions, but at the same time miraculous rebirths and new beginnings. And last but not least, I would like to speak a little bit more about the Jupiter and Pluto conjunction, which even though doesn't perfect itself next week, but it's still extremely close, and this conjunction is going to perfect itself a few days after next week, so the energy is already very, very active. So on one hand, what happened in our lives around March and April this year, that might complete itself, or it might be final pieces of the puzzle falling into place. And this is perfectly valid for the events on the world stage as well, when in a lot of places throughout the world, it was the spike of the coronavirus situation. So we might expect lockdowns, or at least attempts for a lockdown. But at the same time, solutions or some kind of practical ways to tackle the situation has to be simultaneous, because otherwise it's really, really bad news. So the karmic theme that played out in our individual lives and also collectively around March this year returns, but it returns with a solution, because now Jupiter picked up a lot of speed and it is rushing to 0 degrees of Aquarius on the 21st December, when it will meet Saturn there and open the gates to the new paradigm. So this doesn't just mean an amplification and an expansion of the crisis in all of its layers, political, social, and especially economical, but it also represents that the new has to be born at the same time as the old falls and crumbles apart. So if at that time you had a moment of crisis in your life, a massive stagnation, for example, losses, illness, challenges in relationships, well, that theme can return in your life, but this is where now you're greatly empowered to find solutions and naturally to let all these lessons sink in very, very deeply, where they become a value, a personal, spiritual, and even very practical value as life experience for the rest of your life. And if certain people had a massive crisis of their beliefs and their faith, this is where they can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel, where this second crisis or the continuation of the same crisis also births the solution, also births and crystallizes the final inner truth that is meant, of course, to guide us into the new era. Well, thank you so much for listening. I do hope that this was useful. If you'd like a personal reading, just log on to 1millionnights.com and find your dedicated advisor. Wish everyone blessed and magical next week. Until next time, bye for now.